Hello guys, how are you doing? I hope you're doing well and your practices are going wonderfully. I'm gonna be doing a series of videos in which I will go over the concepts, especially the grammar concepts that we have worked so far in class and the ones that will be part of a I would say short but very important test that we will have coming back from your practices. Not the first day, of course, but probably the last day of that week. So on June, the week of, I think it's June 4th to June 8th, something like that, or June 7th. So on that week, we will have a test, and that test will cover the most important concepts we have covered so far, which basically are gerunds and infinitives, and the conditionals, and also modal verbs. So without further ado, let's begin with gerunds and infinitives. So one of the most important things to remember here is that in English, and this is really, really important that we remember this in English, verbs can work as subjects or objects of other verbs. But in reality, if you remember our classes on gerunds and infinitives, we're using them more like the activity. And one important difference that English has with Spanish is that we cannot use the base form. Like in Spanish, we can say la actividad más importante de los deportes de invierno es esquiar. And that word, esquiar, is the base form of the verb. And in English, we cannot do that. We have, if you remember, two forms that we can use. One is the gerund, which is, for example, here. And the other one is the infinitive, which is the word to, meaning nothing, right? Just the word to as part of the form infinitive, to and the verb, and the base form of the verb. So that's important to remember first. Also important, like if we see this, I'm not going to read this entire passage here, but let's take just the first couple of sentences. One of the most popular winter sports is skiing. So here, the gerund skiing, the activity is working as the object, right? So one of the most important winter sports is skiing, the object, right? Grammatically speaking. If we go on, cross-country skiing, which is the subject here, cross-country skiing, requires skiers to use their own strength and movement to get across an area that is covered with snow. So this is the verb. This is the active verb. If you notice, cross-country skiing is a third person or object, singular, right? It's an it, and the form of the verb is consistent, right? The S with that subject. So you can see that the verb in reality here is requires. Skiing is it's part of the subject, right? If you go on here, you can see that we can also use, for example, here we have the infinitive, right? To go, to get, to ski. So we have those two forms that we can use so that we can, let's say, utilize verbs as activities and thus as subjects or objects of verbs and prepositions. And we will see that in a moment. So a gerund can be used as the subject of a sentence or the object of a verb. A gerund can also be used as the object of a preposition. So let's take that apart. First, here we have the blue one as the gerund. So this is the subject, skiing. This is a verb, requires, and this is the object, a lot of strength, right? So that's simple enough. We saw that, we studied that, we had a quiz on that, we did exercises. Here we have, again, the gerund. Many people enjoy skiing, but now skiing, the gerund, is the object of the verb, enjoy. So this is the verb, this is the subject, many people, right? So you can see right away, just by looking at the verb form, that this is consistent with this type of verb of subject, which is third person singular, and this is consistent with this type of subject, which is plural, right? So it doesn't have an IES. So that's important to notice here, and we have the gerund as the object. Then here, some people worry about getting injured. That this is really important, but because this is what I noticed in your some of you are lacking this aspect of English, and I have told that to you before, the aspect of collocations, which are really important. This is one very important type of collocations when we have gerunds as part of as the object of an preposition. So that's like very common combinations. Some people worry about getting injured. So it's not for, it's not on or anything like that. It's this word about. And then when we use about, you cannot use the infinitive. Definitely, you cannot say worry about to get. That's it's nonsense, right? Because we cannot never have two prepositions like that. So important to remember that, right? We can also have the gerund as the object of a preposition. So, like gerunds, infinitives can also be used as the subject of a sentence or the object of a verb. But it is not common to use an infinitive as the subject. Now that's where gerunds come real handy, because like easy enough, you can say some people prefer to ski down a hill, which is how we start using English, right? Easy, that's the object, no trouble. But when we try to do it, when we try to utilize the infinitive as the subject of the sentence, it becomes really tricky, because we have to put we have to write to, or say to control. We have to start a sentence with to, which is kind of weird. To control one speed properly takes a lot of practice. So that's not going to be as convenient as, for example, instead of just doing that, saying controlling one speed properly takes a lot of practice. That's much easier. So it's more common to use gerunds as subject of a sentence. So I want you to remember that too. Here you have another passage, which I would, you can pause the video and read it. And if you finish reading this by now, you can see that, I mean, there's a lot of combinations here. We're using tried, the verb in the past tense, tried, and then the gerund snowboarding as the object. We're using involve, right, and involves, and then again going, the gerund as the object. And then here we have began, past form of begin, and then this infinitive. So that's when you have to remember that certain verbs go well with gerunds. Some other verbs go well with infinitives, and there are some a couple that actually allow you to use both. So gerunds can be used as the objects of certain verbs. So here we have, of course, appreciate, sharing. That's appreciate. It's always going to use the gerund as the object, right? So snowboarding kept growing in popularity. So this is the list that I want you to have. I have given you before other lists, and those you can use them too, but I would really like at least to have this list of verbs that you are going to use when you have the gerund as the object. Okay, so with enjoy, you always use the gerund. You never say enjoy to eat. That's not common, or not correct, I would say. So take a look at this, take a screenshot if you can, and have it handy so that you can study for the test. So some verbs are followed immediately by infinitives. Now, agree, for example, is one instance of that, right? Ski resorts agree to accept both skiers and snowboarders. We have another sentence here. Decide, it's another one. So these ones, you can actually learn them like want to, hope to, plan to, like to. And then although you're not using to as, to really does not count as a preposition here. It's important to remember that. Just to have that sound, want to, hope to, plan to, ready, it's gonna help you remember much more easier, right? So these are the verbs that I want you to know are used with infinitives. So let's practice. I'm gonna be here, for example, I'm gonna give you some time to answer, then I'm going to move ahead. So if you want to take a look here, what would you say? Both skiing and snowboarding can be dangerous. Some people are scared of. So would you say it's get, to get, or getting? So it's of course the gerund getting, because we have the preposition here of. Tatiana enjoys competing, right? So actually here they made a mistake because they're giving you the answer already. That's kind of like silly. Number 3, she hopes. So if you remember this previous list, hopefully you remember that hope is followed by the infinitive, right? So she hopes to participate. Next one. What do you think? So again, need is a verb that is frequently followed by the infinitive. Next one. Definitely. Agree is very, very, very commonly followed by the infinitive. And last one. Again, infinitive. So I hope that your guesses were right on. And if not, you just have to, as I said, you just have to go over this 2 lists that I'm giving you, make a screenshot, and know that those are used for that. Okay, so if you can, I'm gonna keep recording this for those of you who want to learn a little bit more about this topic. And but I would say that would be enough for the test. But let's continue for those of you who want really get better. So some verbs can be followed by either an infinitive or a gerund. Now, actually, this you need to know. This is not optional. Now, yes, definitely, there are words like begin, verbs, I'm sorry, like begin, that you can see them followed by an infinitive, as it is here, to go, or by a gerund, as it is here, going. How do you decide? I don't think you think about it. Well, I don't, at least. So you just kind of know. It's the same thing. I would tend to prefer using gerunds when possible. I think they're cleaner, less wordy. Some verbs can be followed by either an infinitive or a gerund, but the meaning is different. So here, this is actually the part that I would really suggest. If you are actually watching the video to this point, which I would be very happy if that's the case, this is what can really get you to the next level in the usage of gerunds and infinitives, because this is a tricky part. When you use this combination, like stop, when you use it with a gerund, it has a different, I don't want to say meaning, although it is a word that I use here. It kind of like implies a different thing. When you say John stopped snowboarding after he hurt his knee, it's like, it's different. It's like he stopped an activity, right? It's like it sounds. But if you say sometimes on drives through mountains, Ella stops to snowboard, you can see right away that here it's like she stops driving to do that activity. So And this is where I don't agree with most grammar books in this interpretation, because I do think that here in at least for Spanish speakers, for us, and Spanish speakers who are English teachers as we are, this too actually can be function as para, right? Because in Spanish we would say ella para o se para, right? Or se detiene para this, but you cannot say to snowboarding. So that's why they use this to snowboard, right? So it's tricky, but they have a different meaning. You just have to be aware of that. To me, it's really intuitive. I don't really had to study at any point. I just know that if I say it, if I use a gerund with stop, it's like I stopped doing something. Like when you say I quit smoking, for example, which is something that I have to do, well, soon. And for example, sometimes here in this one, if I say I'm gonna stop, if I'm talking about smoking, I'm not gonna say I'm gonna stop for smoking. I'm gonna say I'm gonna stop for smoke, or I'm gonna stop to smoke a cigarette. So it's very intuitive. It's not something you have to think a lot, but do be aware that this is a topic of importance when we deal with these two things, with gerunds and infinitives. So I'm gonna give you a chance to screenshot this if you wanna take a look at it and read it. Okay, so we have the in order to here. Right, some combinations, kind of long combinations here. And another thing that if you're still watching this, kudos, great. Remember that go is very, very frequently followed by a gerund for idiomatic expressions. And we saw that actually a couple of times this semester. Go camping, went hiking, right? So these are some common ones, very, very common ones. I would say that the most common one by far is go walking, go swimming, go running, go jogging, go hiking, go shopping. This is probably the most common one, because not everyone's athletic, but most people do shop. So it's very, very common. In ing forms, gerunds form follow certain special expressions. This is another good thing to have. For example, here they were having a good time using. Now, this is where I would probably want you to kind of like draw a line conceptually, and I'm going to cover this in the video. I'm going to go through the full presentation, but I want you to see that actually here they're not saying gerund. I actually made a mistake in calling gerund. They're actually saying ing forms. In these cases, I do think this verb is being used. It's not the verb though, but it is being used as ando yendo, like an action in progress, right? They were having a good time using their noun. If you say that in Spanish, estaban teniendo un buen rato, pasando un buen rato usando, right? No sería usar. And that's what the gerund would do, right? So I disagree with this interpretation that gerunds are used, that this is a gerund. I would say this is an action in progress. This is kind of like I would say this is a verb in present participle, which is the one we use for the present progressive. So just to be aware of that, not always when you have verbs in present participle, which are the ando yendo, the ing when it is an action in progress, not always it's going to be preceded by the verb to be. So just be aware of that, because then why is this important? Because if you follow the kind of, let's say that you have a rule and you say, well, okay, so every time I see an ing verb and there's no am or is or are or was or were or had been or have been, and so it means that it's a gerund. That's not true, right? That's not true, because I mean, it doesn't matter what books say. What matters is what you think when you read something, when you speak. And as Spanish speakers, we would actually interpret this as an action in progress. So not a gerund. So I would disagree with this interpretation. Just be aware, not always an action in progress, an ing action in progress is preceded by the verb to be. Okay, though you have, you can have these phrases handy. Have trouble, have difficulty, right? Doing this. You see how it feels like in Spanish we would say tiene problemas haciendo esto, right? So it's not really, in that case, it's not like the gerund, because the gerund is more like just the activity, like hacer, right? So it really doesn't work the same way. But it is categorized. It is in this category, so we have to at least be aware. So these three collocations, have trouble or difficulty, have a hard time, have a difficult time, and then the ing verb are very, very common. Okay? In different tenses, grammatical tenses. Okay, so if you're still watching, great. We move on. An infinitive phrase is often used with it as the subject of a sentence. So now you might have seen this before, probably in your second semester or something. You should have, at least. It's when you have the dummy subject. I think we actually talked about it one time. So you have the it as the replacement, like let's say like the dummy for this. So here it refers to this, but you cannot have an empty space in this space here, because it's this, the place where the subject should be. But you have the subject here, so you have to put an it. You have to say it or write it, and it becomes really annoying sometimes, but it's just what it is. In Spanish, we would drop the pronoun. We would say es difícil caminar o andar, no? I've never been sure exactly, like hiking. It's like caminar, but it's like walking in a kind of like a fast-paced or something. I've seen it used a lot for when I've seen that walk is more for like to get somewhere, and hike is more like for a sport or to exercise. I'm not sure though how you would say that this in Spanish. I just know that it's kind of like walking for a hobby or for sport. Same thing here. It is fun to try. So it is very common to have this pattern: it, and then the verb to be, an adjective, and then the infinitive. You can also have the negative form. So this is some stuff that I would really like you to have to be aware of, at least. I think this part you had it right, most of you, in the diagnostic test. So I don't think it's a big deal. Okay, so practice number 2. Let's see. What winter activities do you enjoy? Yeah, well, let's not do this one because it's actually open. Forget about that. So we have another reading if you want to screenshot that and practice reading. Okay, well, I'm gonna stop here. Next video I'm gonna be talking about unreal verbs and, well, how we use them in conditionals. Or probably I'm gonna cover the modals that we also covered this semester. So just don't get rusty, and I'm gonna also after the next video I'm gonna upload a practice sheet for the third conditional. Remember that you have handed or you should have already turned in a worksheet on the second conditional last week. So I'm gonna assign a worksheet for the third conditional, which we covered. It was the last conditional we covered, and I'm gonna review it in a video too, and I'm gonna assign that for these 2 weeks. So be prepared for that. I'm gonna let you know through an email. So I hope you continue having a good time, guys, with your practices, and thanks a lot for watching, and let me know if you have any questions. Bye.